Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to let you all know we have a bit of an audio issue at the moment, so our staff is working on just clarifying our connection on Zoom, and when that's done, we will start our meeting. So we expect this will take a couple minutes, so please stay tuned, and we'll start as soon as possible. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we are back online, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. So good morning to everyone. This is the 22nd meeting of the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee of this term of council. I do want to acknowledge that the City of Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe First Nations people. They have been inhabitants and stewards of these lands for millennia, and we honor and we recognize them. At this time, I'd like to turn to our committee coordinator to conduct a roll call, please.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor Desroches.
Here.
Councillor Dudas. Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Luloff.
Good morning.
Conseillère Plante.
Hello.
Councillor Skalski.
Here.
Vice Chair Hill.
Present.
Chair Brockington.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So before we begin, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that 2 weeks ago, on March the 8th, the city marked International Women's Day. This global day recognizes women's achievements, highlights the need to confront discrimination, and advance gender equity. Emergency and Protective Services is proud to have women serving in leadership and non-traditional roles across the entire department. Women continue to break down barriers, pursue their passions, and apply their skills in service of our city and of our community. And I invite everyone to join me in recognizing their important contributions, and we thank them. Turning to today's agenda, first, we will formally receive a response to an inquiry submitted by Vice Chair Hill on January 28th, 2026 council meeting regarding extremism-related risks. And following that, we will receive a report on the food premises licensing review. As part of this term of council's bylaw review work plan, City Council directed staff to review the city's licensing regulations for food premises. Today, we'll hear from staff on the outcome of that review and the recommendations coming forward. We do have a number of delegations that will speak to this matter as well. So on that note, I will ask if there are any declarations of interest at this point. I see none. Item 3 is the confirmation of minutes from our meeting February 19th, 2026. I hope everyone's had an opportunity to review the minutes. Are the minutes from February 19th, 2026 confirmed? Confirmed? Thank you. Item 4, as I mentioned, is a response to the inquiries, the extremism-related risks. Does anyone wish to lift this item at this point? I will note that prior to today, we did receive one written communication from Mr. Don Lalone. That matter is on the City Council SharePoint site, should you wish to read the submission. So no one is asking to hold this item, so we will continue then. Item 5, the food premises licensing review. As I mentioned, we have 9 delegates who will speak to the matter once staff have gone through their presentation. So we'll start off with the General Manager Perot, with an introduction.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members of the committee. Today we have before you our food premises business license bylaw review. It was part of this term of council's bylaw review work plan. So as directed by council, we're bringing this item forward today. I'm joined by members of our public policy development team, Samantha Montreuil, as well as Josh Davis, as well as our associate director in bylaw and regulatory services, Jake Gravel. So I will hand it over to Samantha and Josh to deliver this morning's presentation.
Thank you, Ryan. This morning's review is part of the approved bylaw review work plan for this term of council that has a broader focus of updating the business licensing bylaw. The broader review has been supported by a number of reviews specific to certain categories of businesses, such as hardscaping contractors, which came before this committee in October. Today's review focuses on food premises, also known as Schedule 7 of the licensing bylaw. During our review, we heard that the regulations in this schedule are largely working well, and our recommendations today largely seek to accommodate emerging business models in the industry and to reflect some legislative changes. I'd like to take a minute to thank Joshua Davis, who has been leading this review, and David Kurz and the rest of the team for their excellent work on this matter. And Joshua will take us through our recommendations.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you, Samantha. Food premises in Ottawa, such as eating establishments, bake shops, and butcher shops, are required to obtain a business license before operating. Licensing allows the city to maintain oversight of more than 3,000 food premises currently operating across Ottawa. It provides clear, consistent framework that applies to all food businesses. Some of the main reasons the city licenses food premises is to ensure compliance with a variety of important legislation, including provincial public health requirements under the Health Protection and Promotion Act, as well as municipal zoning bylaws and other essential elements like insurance. This review focuses specifically on modernizing Schedule 7 of the licensing bylaw, which deals with food premises. First, some key definitions were outdated and didn't reflect modern food business trends. For example, shared commercial kitchens, a growing business model, weren't clearly identified in the bylaw. We also examined home-based low-risk food businesses, which are increasing in prevalence in the city and are now permitted in residential areas through the new zoning bylaw. Finally, we looked at expanded activity food premises, businesses that offer food services along with live entertainment, which currently require both a food premise license as well as an amusement place license. Next slide, please. As a part of our consultation in this review, we reached out to all licensed food premises citywide through an online questionnaire that ran from July 28th to September 26, 2025. This generated over 200 responses from restaurants, cafes, cafeterias, bake shops, and shared commercial kitchens. Staff also circulated a What We Learned report, as well as a discussion paper on our proposed regulatory options to all licensees and registered interest holders. We also circulated our survey with several interest holder groups, including business improvement areas, Ottawa Tourism, Ottawa Board of Trade, the Ontario Restaurant, Hotel, and Motel Association, and we also consulted across city departments and branches to ensure the regulatory framework aligned with operational realities. About 10% of survey respondents were rural businesses, and they provided detailed feedback on the unique challenges they face, such as seasonal operations, lower customer volumes, and infrastructure constraints. Additionally, staff attended the Nightlife Economy Town Hall and consulted with the Office of the Nightlife Commissioner. Staff also consulted directly with some local shared commercial kitchens, and all of this feedback informed staff's report's recommendations.
Donc, nous avons consulté tous les services d'alimentation titulaires d'un permis municipal à l'aide d'un questionnaire sur Internet actif du 28 juillet au 26 septembre 2025. Nous avons reçu plus de 200 réponses de restaurants, de cafés, de traiteurs et de boulangeries. Le personnel a également remis à tous les titulaires du permis un rapport intitulé « Ce que nous avons appris » et un document de travail sur nos propositions de règlement. Nous avons aussi distribué notre sondage à certaines parties intéressées, notamment aux zones d'amélioration commerciale, à Tourisme Ottawa et au regroupement des gens d'affaires de la capitale nationale. Nous avons également consulté les directions générales de la ville et les services municipaux pour nous assurer que le cadre réglementaire était aligné sur les réalités opérationnelles. Environ 10% des répondants du sondage étaient des entreprises rurales. Elles ont présenté dans le détail les difficultés uniques auxquelles elles font face, notamment la saisonnalité des activités, le volume de clientèle plus faible et les contraintes sur le plan des infrastructures. En plus, le personnel a participé à la réunion publique sur la vie nocturne et a consulté le bureau du commissaire à la vie nocturne. Le personnel a également consulté directement certaines cuisines commerciales communes locales. Tous les commentaires recueillis ont étayé directement nos recommandations aujourd'hui. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît.
Through the comprehensive consultation process, staff identified some key issues. One of these issues we identified was the current definitions in the licensing bylaw haven't kept pace with how food businesses now operate. Newer business models, particularly shared commercial kitchens, often called ghost kitchens, aren't clearly defined in the bylaw. This has created some confusion for operators and the third-party users renting kitchen space. Another key issue relates to food premises that offer live entertainment or operate later into the evening. Currently, these establishments are required to obtain both a food premise license and an amusement place license in order to operate, and staff heard in consultation that licensees felt this was not efficient. Additionally, noise complaints at food premises continue to be one of the most frequent types of service requests they receive. Between 2022 and 2024, the city received an average of 862 noise complaints per year, specifically tied to food premises. And in addition to noise, these establishments can at times experience challenges with patrons lining up outside or lingering on sidewalks, which can create safety concerns or impact surrounding communities. The current bylaw doesn't provide specific tools to address these issues proactively, especially in areas with a growing nightlife presence. We also reviewed issues related to home-based low-risk food businesses, as recent provincial changes now allow individuals to prepare certain low-risk foods at home for sale, provided they provide public health requirements. The city's new zoning bylaw permits these businesses in residential areas as long as they're only producing low-risk foods. However, the licensing bylaw has not been updated to reflect these changes, which has created a gap. Next slide, please. Staff recommends several updates to several definitions in the licensing bylaw as part of this bylaw review. Staff propose updating the definition of a food premise and removing the term eating establishment and replacing it with restaurant to be more clear overall. Additionally, staff propose a requirement for shared commercial kitchens to maintain an up-to-date log of all clients using their facility, as well as ensuring clients carry a minimum of $2 million commercial general liability insurance. In response to concerns raised by shared commercial kitchens, staff are also proposing a new offense for misrepresentation of where food is prepared. We're also recommending the creation of a new license category called expanded activity food premise. This applies to food premises that offer entertainment, such as live music, dancing, trivia, or other activities beyond standard food service. Right now, these businesses require both a food premise license and an amusement place license, and this new category consolidates these requirements into a single license, which reduces administrative burden while still ensuring the city has the regulatory tools needed to address noise and manage patrons. Staff also recommend enhanced authorities for the chief license inspector to address repeated non-compliance with the noise bylaw. These authorities include being able to require the closing of doors and windows to mitigate noise during noise-producing hours, being able to require the relocation of noise-producing equipment within the establishment to mitigate noise, and being able to require the expanded activity food premise obtain a professional engineer's report with recommendations for how to come into compliance with the noise bylaw, as well as confirmation that required remediation of the premises has been completed. We will note that the professional engineer's report will only be required in cases of chronic non-compliance when all other enforcement tools have been ineffective in bringing the licensee into compliance. We're also recommending that home-based businesses preparing low-risk foods be exempt from the municipal licensing requirement. This aligns with provincial regulatory changes, which allow residents to prepare and sell low-risk foods as long as they meet public health requirements. It also aligns with the city's new zoning bylaw, which permits these businesses in residential areas, provided they only produce low-risk foods. Exempting these operators supports small-scale entrepreneurship, particularly home-based bakers and similar startups, while still ensuring food safety because these businesses remain subject to provincial health oversight. Another important component of this review is the proposed increase in commercial general liability insurance from 1 million to 2 million. This reflects what we heard is already occurring in the sector, as over 71% of respondents to the survey indicated they already carried between $2 and $5 million commercial general liability insurance.
Le personnel recommande l'ajout d'exigences pour les cuisines commerciales communes, dont la tenue d'un registre à jour des clients et d'exiger que tous leurs clients contractent une assurance responsabilité commerciale générale d'au moins 2 millions de dollars. On propose aussi une nouvelle infraction pour fausses déclarations concernant l'endroit où les aliments sont produits. Ces mesures auront pour effet d'améliorer la transparence, d'appuyer les enquêtes de santé publique aux besoins et d'assurer l'équité entre exploitants. Nous recommandons aussi la création d'une nouvelle catégorie de permis appelée « Services d'alimentation à activité élargie ». Cette catégorie s'applique aux services d'alimentation qui offrent du divertissement, comme de la musique en direct, de la danse, des soirées de jeux questionnaires ou d'autres activités que celles des services d'alimentation à proprement parler. Pour le moment, ces établissements doivent habituellement détenir un permis de service d'alimentation et un permis de salle de divertissement. La nouvelle catégorie fusionne ces activités en un seul permis, réduisant le fardeau administratif tout en fournissant à la Ville les outils réglementaires requis pour remédier à des problèmes de bruit et pour gérer les clients à l'extérieur des établissements. Le personnel recommande également le renforcement des pouvoirs de l'inspecteur des permis dans des cas répétés de non-conformité au règlement sur le bruit. Ces pouvoirs accrus comprennent ceux de pouvoir exiger la fermeture des portes et des fenêtres pour contenir le bruit aux heures les plus bruyantes, de pouvoir exiger le déplacement des équipements qui produisent du bruit dans l'établissement afin d'atténuer le son, de pouvoir exiger un service alimentaire qu'il obtienne un rapport d'ingénieur agréé, recommandant des façons de se conformer au règlement sur le bruit et de pouvoir exiger une preuve comme quoi les mesures correctives ont été apportées. Le personnel note qu'un rapport d'ingénieur agréé ne sera exigé qu'après des cas répétés de non-conformité et lorsqu'aucune autre mesure n'incite l'établissement à respecter le règlement. Nous recommandons aussi que les entreprises de produits alimentaires à domicile présentant un faible risque soient exemptées de l'obligation de détenir un permis municipal. Cette mesure correspond aux changements réglementaires apportés par la province qui permettent aux résidents de préparer des produits alimentaires à faible risque à domicile pourvu qu'ils respectent les normes de santé publique du règlement sur les services d'alimentation de l'Ontario. Et s'inscrit aussi dans le nouveau règlement sur le zonage de la Ville qui autorise dorénavant la présence de ces entreprises en zone résidentielle pourvu qu'elles produisent uniquement des aliments à faible risque. L'exemption de ces entreprises favorise l'entrepreneuriat à petite échelle, notamment les boulangeries-pâtisseries maison et les jeunes pousses similaires, tout en assurant la sécurité alimentaire. Car ces entreprises continuent de faire l'objet d'une surveillance par les services de santé publique provinciaux. La proposition de faire passer l'actuelle couverture d'assurance responsabilité commerciale générale, 2 millions de dollars, comme c'est généralement le cas, à 2 millions de dollars au minimum, ajoute une couche de protection pour l'exploitant d'une part, mais aussi pour les clients, pour les détaillants et ultimement pour le grand public. Cette hausse reflète les pratiques de l'industrie, car plus de 71% des répondants du sondage ont indiqué avoir déjà une assurance responsabilité commerciale générale de 2 à 5 millions de dollars. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît.
One of the first steps in implementation is extending the expiry date for all currently issued food premises and amusement place licenses. So instead of expiring on March 31st, 2026, these licenses would now be valid until May 31st, 2026. This 2-month extension gives both the city and licensees the time needed to transition smoothly to the new framework. We're also recommending a new annual fee of $448 for the expanded activity food premise license class. This reflects the combined scope of what used to require 2 licenses for food premises and amusement place and continues the city's established cost recovery model. And finally, to ensure a smooth rollout, staff and bylaw regulatory services will develop clear and accessible communications for both licensees and the public. And importantly, all these recommendations can be implemented using existing resources within bylaw regulatory services. There's no request for new funding or staff. Next slide, please. We're bringing this report's recommendations forward today for consideration by this committee, and if accepted, will rise to council on April 8th, 2026. And if approved at council, the revised food premise regulations will come into effect on May 31st, 2026. That concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for staff for addressing another item on our work plan. It's good to see progress from an ambitious work plan that we developed earlier this term of council, and appreciate that it's here before us today at committee. So colleagues, there are 9 delegations we'll hear at this time. I will also flag that we've received 1 written submission from the Hintonburg Community Association that has been added to the SharePoint site if you wish to review that email submission. But at this time, I would like to invite delegates to come forward. All delegates will have up to 5 minutes for their presentation. At the 1-minute mark, I will simply say 1 minute. And if you're still speaking at the end of 5 minutes, I will have to intervene to conclude your 5 minutes. For those who are present in person, we'll just ask you to come up and sit at the table here at the end, and there's a microphone before you. You could just press the button at the bottom of the microphone. So we just take people in the order that they registered. First is Laurier Trevor Deutsch. Good morning, sir. Right here. When you're ready, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Good morning, council members, and thank you for this opportunity to provide feedback on the proposed changes to the food premises licensing. My name is Laurier Trevor Deutsch, and I'm a business development consultant in the city. As part of my practice, I oversee licensing and renewals for approximately a dozen establishments here, as well for a cafe owned and operated by my son. I deal with food, amusement, and liquor licenses all the time. I also volunteer my services to several local businesses if they really need them, and a lot of them do. So I have both personal and professional experience in this matter. I'd like to begin by noting that this review process has been a very positive experience and represents a strong first step forward to modernizing the city's licensing framework at a time when the industry is really struggling. Feedback was clearly welcomed, and I appreciate that my input was considered even where it may not have been fully incorporated into the recommendations. That said, I do have a few suggested refinements that I believe are important and would be well received by the industry. First, and most importantly, there is a need to clearly define what constitutes an amusement license and which businesses are required to obtain one. The city's website currently defines an amusement business as simply one that provides entertainment or amusement, including establishments with 5 or more arcade machines, billiard tables, bowling alleys, golf ranges, skating, and public halls. However, the bylaw review refers specifically to businesses hosting live entertainment. This has always been confusing to me. For example, some venues believe they require an amusement license simply for having a DJ at night. It is unclear to me whether that interpretation is correct. The lack of clarity has been a recurring issue. It raises the question of whether establishments like my family business or restaurants should require an amusement license if they occasionally offer live music, such as a guitarist on the weekend. In my view, this does not align with the original intent of the license category. We need a more objective test of what constitutes an amusement license or an amusement place. For example, does the license specifically apply to live entertainment as in the review, or will it apply to DJs? Is the entertainment incidental to the business, or is it its primary draw? Will patrons attend primarily for entertainment, or is the entertainment ancillary to the restaurant? Will there be lineups, which I think is really one of the keys? In other words, does the activity really require distinct regulatory oversight above and beyond that of a food establishment? In short, the definition of amusement should be modernized and clarified. The current framework seems to have been designed many years ago and primarily for arcades and similar venues. In fact, the first time I applied for an amusement license, my client was required to obtain a police records check for the vulnerable sector, which the police department refused to give because there were no youth involved. So it should not unintentionally capture restaurants whose primary business is food, but who offer incidental entertainment to enhance the customer experience. With respect to simply combining food and amusement licenses, while this is helpful, I don't think it's going to significantly decrease the administrative burden on licensees, and it certainly doesn't help us on the financial side since you're just combining the license fee. In fact, while I applaud this, the real beneficiary will be the city itself, as it will significantly decrease the costs associated with the issuance and administration of the license. So if you're going to do this, why not give us some of that advantage? Second, with respect to recommendations regarding home kitchens, I strongly support the direction being taken. However, while the food itself that's being referred to is low risk, the preparation environment may not be. As such,
1 minute.
Okay. As such, I would recommend requiring home kitchen operators to obtain a simple food handler certificate. It's $25, a couple of hours work, and I think will really enhance safety. Finally, I note that the license review references the desire for online renewal of business licenses, but does not go into further detail. This should be a top priority. At present, license renewals require either mailing a check to the city, which a lot of businesses don't operate checks, including my own, or spending a lot of time at the licensing office to pay for this renewal. This is inefficient and outdated, and by comparison, the licenses I renew in Toronto take 2 minutes and I do them online on my phone. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I'm welcome to questions.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation this morning. I'll just see if any of my colleagues have a question. Vice Chair Hill, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation this morning, Mr. Trevor Deutsch. I have a question about the combined license piece. You spoke to the cost and you spoke to I think I would sum it as a bit of redundancy, but could you elaborate on that a little bit in terms of what that means from a licensing perspective? Are you seeing inspectors come multiple times for the same site kind of thing? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, absolutely. And on the licensing side, let me give you an example. When we licensed Med Supper Club in the market in Lansdowne, we had 3 fire inspections, one for liquor, one for the amusement license, and one for the food license. It was the same inspector doing the same inspection, all within several weeks of each other. And we have a very good relationship with both the food inspectors and the fire inspectors. They're very helpful, but they are overworked. And when I see them come in 3 times in the matter of 6 weeks to do the same inspection, that doesn't seem to be a very efficient use of resources.
Thank you very much. And I note your comments about the ambiguity on the amusement licensing and the potential options for online registration. So I'll be asking some questions to staff on that once it's my time to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Lulov.
I fully understand what you're saying about this ambiguity when it comes to the amusement license. I have several businesses in my ward that are either a restaurant or a local brewery, and ancillary to the work that they do there, they open up their space in the evenings after the work is done for things like trivia night, karaoke, maybe like a single person and a guitar or a small band. And many of them have recently found out that they require an amusement license to do that. And when you look at the wording within the amusement license, it reads like it's meant for like a bowling alley or for an arcade or a midway or that sort of thing. The work that's been done on this policy Do you think that that makes things clearer, or do these issues still exist?
I think it does not clarify because we're still talking about the term entertainment and what defines entertainment. My point is that the bylaw should be based on what the regulatory enforcement needs to be. As I said, if I put a guitarist in my establishment in the evening, it does not require the city to have additional regulatory enforcement. If I'm going to have a lineup in front of the door, it does. So, you know, it's like an AGCO license. You get a basic AGCO license. There are different subcategories that go on with it. For example, you can have a caterer's endorsement. You can have offsite. So in the end, I appreciate that the city needs to deal with the bylaw aspects, but if there are no bylaw aspects, then it should simply be part of the food premises. It should be part of being a food premises. We're not an entertainment venue, and there is no real definition of what entertainment is. If we have canned music, is that entertainment? I don't know.
Like a venue that fits, 50 people or something like that, and it's a ticketed event, because obviously you can't say you can't have 100 people in a venue that only holds 50 people. The event sells out. There's no queuing. You just walk in. There shouldn't be a requirement for further licensing, is what you're saying.
That's our position. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that makes common sense. All right, thank you very much. Really appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, sir, for your delegation today. Much
Thank you so much.
appreciated. Mélanie Brûlé. Good morning. Bienvenue.
Good morning. Merci. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time today. Also, thank you for the work that you do to keep this city safe, everyone. And that's a lot of work that was in that report. My name is Mélanie Brûlé. I'm the Executive Director of the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition. We act as Ottawa's music office and represent over 500 music industry professionals, including venue owners, operators, artists, and technicians across the city. I want to start by saying that I support many items recommended in this report, particularly the move towards a single licensing category for venues offering food and live entertainment. As I mentioned in my email last week, I think this is a step forward in helping streamline processes for small businesses that are already working very hard. I am here, however, to do my due diligence and raise concerns about two specific proposed enforcement tools outlined on page 17. One is the ability to mandate the relocation of sound equipment within a venue, and the ability to require professional acoustic engineering reports at the expense of the licensee. As currently written, these measures are being introduced without clearly defined thresholds, processes, or protections for operators. If we're serious about downtown revitalization and building a strong nightlife economy, we need policies developed in meaningful collaboration with the creative industries sector, with clear boundaries that allow operators, residents, and enforcement all to succeed. As you can imagine, vague measures create uncertainty, and for many small and mid-sized venues, a real financial risk. Acoustic reports alone can be extremely costly, into the tens of thousands, as noted in the report, and also many venues operate with custom-built sound systems. There's an important distinction between volume and acoustics, and without clear standards or technical expertise guiding these decisions, we risk creating more tension and actually not solving the issue. It should be noted that this isn't about a lack of willingness from venues to operate and cooperate with the set parameters. It's that the set expectations and the steps to meet them could and should be more clearly defined. I shared a letter to the committee from one of our members who has spent the last year investing in soundproofing, working with neighbors, and engaging with bylaw, and is still in court. This is an example of a gap, and the cornerstone to resolving this situation has been the inability to access the data needed to move forward. So that points to a broader issue. These measures are addressing noise and acoustics, but are being introduced through a licensing framework rather than through a proper noise bylaw review where clear standards, definitions, and processes can be established. Other cities approach this differently. They pair enforcement with clear policy frameworks, defined thresholds, and shared responsibilities like an agent of change principle. This improves compliance and reduces conflict. As I noted in my email, the Nightlife Council raised the need for updated noise and sound policies during the last bylaw review, and we understand that this work is anticipated for the next term of council. Right now, Ottawa is proposing to expand enforcement without that policy foundation in place. So my recommendation is simple: advancing the broader licensing updates, but temporarily hold the implementation of the 2 expanded activity provisions related to relocating sound equipment and requiring acoustic engineering reports, and address these with the upcoming noise bylaw review with proper consultation with the industry. We recognize that this is a complex issue, which is exactly why it's important to get it right. Done well, this can support public safety and the long-term viability of our venues, which are critical to Ottawa's economy, nightlife, and downtown revitalization. So OMIC is here to help. This is exactly the role that we play, and we look forward to continuing the work together to ensure that this is implemented in a way that is clear, fair, and effective. Thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. That's much appreciated. Do you have a question from my colleague, Councillor Devine?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Melanie, for the delegation. And not just for the delegation, but for the practical solutions that you recommend. On that, when you were referring to those 2 enforcement measures, and forgive me if I get the terminology wrong, but the forced relocation of sound equipment and the requirement for acoustic reports, were those measures as developed, were they developed through any form of consultation engagement with local industry?
No, we were sent an email that was the mass email that was sent to everyone around the bylaw review for food premises, but included in that PDF, there was nothing mentioning these particular points. Yeah, we were not consulted.
And staying on that line, I assume that you probably have relationships or understanding of how other cities might develop practices in this area. On those 2 measures, the city's ability to enforce through bylaw the relocation of equipment and or demand acoustic reports, are you aware of whether or not other cities use those kinds of tools? It's okay if you don't know, but...
No, I am aware. Actually, every 2 months, I meet with other music officers all across Ontario. So every 2 months, we have a standing meeting with music officers. So we meet with London, Ontario, Kingston, Mississauga, Toronto. Now we have Kitchener and Sault Ste. Marie and Northern Ontario. So we have a standing meeting that I chair so that I could get more information when I started this role 4 years ago. So we are often exchanging best practices. So I did absolutely reach out to all of them, and there is nothing in a licensing review in any city in Ontario that has a music strategy that is included with the relocation of sound equipment. There's nothing that we can tell has a licensing review or a licensing bylaw that includes that.
So just to be absolutely clear on that, in those cities that you consulted with, and on those 2 particular measures, relocating equipment and requiring acoustic reports, in your sister cities, you didn't find that those cities have bylaws that speak to those as enforcement tools through bylaw, through licensing?
Through licensing, correct. There's a lot of folks that have noise bylaws, and actually they changed it into calling it sound bylaw, so that we're mitigating the thought of nightlife being a nuisance. So there's a lot of work to be done. We're very much at the beginning, but no, you are correct.
And I'm not sure if it's from you or from other delegates, but it's not the first time I've heard requests that the term noise bylaw be replaced by sound bylaw, because not all sound is noise. And then just to that, I was going to ask whether or not the industry had specific recommendations of how to honor the spirit of those measures. But it sounds like very clearly you're proposing that those 2 measures be held until it goes through the noise and or sound bylaw. But if the spirit of that bylaw pertaining to the relocation of equipment and requiring sound acoustic reports, did your industry come up with alternative ways of achieving the same end without having to be as disruptive and or as costly as that?
I think Ottawa is really at the beginning of looking at creative industries and looking at, nightlife. And so there's a lot of work to be done within the culture of all of this stuff. So I think, passing it through a very quick licensing review as opposed to really looking deeply at where it is we want to go. I think that's kind of maybe the spirit of what's happening here. And we're all about making that happen and putting the right people in the room so that there is expertise guiding this stuff so we can get it right.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for your delegation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Following, we now have Aaron Benjamin. Good morning to you as well.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Chief Hutt, great to see you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. You're going to hear some similar themes from me as you did from Melanie. My name is Aaron Benjamin. I am the president and CEO of the Canadian Live Music Association for a few more weeks, and I'm here on behalf of live music venues, promoters, and the broader ecosystem of cultural workers who contribute to Ottawa's economy, identity, and vibrancy. Let me start by acknowledging that there are absolutely positive elements in this report. The move toward a more streamlined licensing framework, including a single category for venues offering live music and programming, is meaningful and a very welcome step forward. However, as written, this framework also introduces new enforcement tools that, without clear guardrails, could create significant financial and operational risk for live music venues, particularly small and mid-sized operators. These are not reasons to stop the work, obviously, but they are reasons to refine it before implementation. The core issue is that the report expands enforcement authority without clearly defining the thresholds, processes, or protections for operators. For example, the proposed authority for the chief license inspector to impose mitigation measures such as relocating sound equipment or requiring professional acoustic engineering reports, which we've heard can carry costs ranging from $3,000 upwards to tens of thousands of dollars. For many venues, obviously not a manageable expense. What remains unclear is under what conditions are these measures triggered, what constitutes a repeat violation, and what opportunity exists for a venue to resolve issues before escalation. As written, much of this framework relies on discretionary decision-making without clearly defined thresholds. That creates inconsistency, or can create inconsistency in application and uncertainty for operators who are trying to comply in good faith. We're already seeing the consequences of that ambiguity. There are cases where venues have made significant investments, engaged with neighbors, worked closely with city staff and bylaw, yet still face escalation. That suggests that the issue is not a lack of effort or willingness to comply. It's the absence of a clear and reliable pathway to compliance. There's also the broader structural concern Melanie touched on. The framework is being introduced in the context of ongoing bylaw modernization while key elements, particularly the city's noise bylaw, remain unresolved. In effect, we are layering expanded enforcement onto an incomplete policy foundation. At the same time, live music venues are not typical food premises. They are cultural infrastructure. They support local artists, they create jobs, they drive tourism and contribute to the kind of city building Ottawa has consistently prioritized. If we create a system that is unpredictable or cost prohibitive, we risk not just reducing complaints, we risk reducing the number of venues themselves. To ensure that framework is workable and balanced, we recommend 4 specific adjustments. First, formal recognition of live music venues as distinct cultural infrastructure within the licensing framework. Second, clearly define thresholds and escalation pathways before costly mitigation measures such as mandatory engineering reports can be imposed. Third, adoption of agent of change principles to ensure responsibility for noise mitigation is fairly distributed as our amazing city grows and intensifies. And finally, fourth, alignment with a modernized noise bylaw rather than layering new enforcement tools onto a framework that's already been identified as needing review. Finally, we'd like to note that key industry stakeholders were not meaningfully consulted in this process, despite raising the issues in previous bylaw discussions. There's a great opportunity to correct that before implementation, and I would like to acknowledge, pleased to say that last week we did meet with city staff on this issue. They were very amenable to working more closely together in the future, so that's great. In closing, absolutely not here to oppose the work, just here to help get it right. So we urge the committee to take your time to refine this policy, to engage the sector, in particular the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition, and ensure that Ottawa's live music ecosystem, our amazing live music ecosystem, can continue to thrive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Benjamin, for your presentation. We do have, I thought we had a question. We do. Councillor Devine, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Aaron, for being here and always for being such a fantastic advocate for Ottawa arts and entertainment and culture. So not only did I notice a lot of similarity between your delegation and the former, but a terminology used that I didn't understand. I don't mind admitting when I don't understand something. What do you mean? Would you mind telling me? Because I could either just, go Google it or ask you. What do you mean by agent of change principles, your third request?
Excellent question. So agent of change, and my colleagues who will follow me, I'm sure will have additional insight here. Agent of change, just really high level, means that what is coming into the space to create the change is responsible for helping to manage that change. So in a case of, let's take a development, a building is going up and there's an existing live music venue already in that neighborhood. The developer of the building is responsible for managing the pre-existing reality of the venue. So ensuring that there are triple glazed windows and talking to residents who may rent or purchase in that building, the experience of the neighborhood and what to expect. So managing the change. The agent of change is the one who's creating the change, and managing the pre-existing relationships to help mitigate issues of noise in particular.
And in your case, because I think you said the third recommendation was the adoption of agent of change principles.
Correct.
In this case, would that mean, because I don't think you're talking necessarily about changes that bylaw might be imposing on existing venues, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but in what you just described, would that mean that if there's a venue that might not be a live music venue, but a new agent of change is coming in to transform it into such, that the onus of responsibility becomes that agent of change to make it so that it is conducive with zoning and or bylaw? What would be the onus of responsibility on that agent of change if that were somebody looking to transform a venue into a music venue?
You're absolutely right. So it works both ways. It's definitely, when we look at the case of the new venue history and on Rideau coming in fact, announcing their first 9 shows today, I believe, they would be the agent of change in that context. And so they would be responsible for working responsibly with the local community to understand the implications and the impact of their business on pre-existing businesses and neighborhoods.
And if rather than being a new venue with a new developer, let's say, if an existing venue is making renovations and or changes to their established venue, do they also then become an agent of change?
Right. So if there's no new development in the area and it's a venue that is attempting to, if there are issues ongoing, I would say that venue absolutely has a responsibility to manage the impact of their business on surrounding other businesses and residential, et cetera. In practice, I'd like to think that it's everybody, everyone can work together to resolve challenges, especially when we understand what constitutes a thriving neighborhood, in particular in our downtown core and surrounding neighborhoods. If we're not mindful of what the elements are of a thriving, especially music city, we risk taking, losing venues that we talked about. If we make it too hard to operate different types of businesses that we know add to the vibrancy and prosperity of our visitors and residents, then, we do that despite ourselves. So finding that balance, Councillor, I think is everyone's responsibility. What the law says exactly, I'm not 100% sure, but in the context of agent of change, I think philosophically, everyone has a role to play in that particular scenario.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you very much, Aaron, for your advocacy on this issue. And I agree. I love the music scene here in Ottawa, from small venues to big concerts. I will ask a couple questions to staff to follow up on your 4 comments. But I am very heartened to hear that you've had conversations leading up to this that have been positive, and we have an opportunity between now and council to perhaps make some tweaks as need be. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your delegation this morning. We appreciate
you.
it. Thank you. Next, we have Geneviève Bertournet. Good morning. Bienvenue.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, Chair and members of committee. Thank you for your time and your ongoing work to improve our city and its processes. My name is Geneviève Bertournet, and I am the founder, operator, and creative director of Art House, located in West Centertown. Art House is a licensed cafe, art gallery, and event space. And since opening over 9 years ago, we have featured hundreds of local visual artists, musicians, DJs, and performers of all kinds, and have hosted countless community gatherings. We are known as a welcoming and inclusive space, a lively hub that supports discovery, creativity, and connection. We are also known for being one of Ottawa's only late-night cafes, with our busiest times during the week being between 6 and 10 p.m. While we are a smaller venue, we host events almost daily, and our programming is crucial both to the success of our business and to community building. Art House is a member of the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition, and in the interest of other members, fellow venue owners, and the city as a whole, I would like to express my concerns regarding certain expanded authorities for the Chief License Inspector proposed in the report for the Food Premises Licensing Review. Specifically, I am referring to the ability to mandate the relocation of sound equipment and to require professional acoustic engineering reports at the licensee's expense. Let it be clear that I recognize the importance of ensuring that our shared spaces remain respectful, safe, and enjoyable for everyone. I value the city's ongoing efforts towards this goal and can appreciate the complexity of balancing the wants and needs of residents, businesses, and the broader community. This is why I believe that how enforcement measures are implemented matters greatly. As currently proposed, these new authorities introduce significant uncertainty and risk for small and mid-sized venues, particularly in the absence of clearly defined standards, processes, and access to tools and guidance. Decisions made without the appropriate expertise or a structured framework can lead to unnecessary costs and unintended harm, including ineffective changes and confusion and conflict with no clear path to resolution. For many venues like mine, being required to obtain a professional engineering report costing several $1,000s or significantly alter a sound system could seriously compromise the business. We already operate in what is considered a high-risk industry with high volatility and inherent unpredictability. We run on tight margins and often have to manage sizable and unexpected expenses. As an example, Art House has recently had to spend over $70,000 to undergo renovations to address building code issues and ensure business viability. The need for these changes arose from factors that have been outside of our control. Having been faced with many other challenges and setbacks over recent years, we were already in a period of recovery when we had to take on this project. And given our current position, I'm not sure that we would survive another blow. More broadly, the presence of these risks may discourage operators from opening or continuing to run cultural spaces in Ottawa, something I believe we all want to avoid. Venues are critical components of a city's cultural and economic infrastructure. They provide platforms for emerging artists, boosting cultural vitality, community engagement, and social cohesion, while acting as economic catalysts that create jobs, strengthen local supply chains, and attract visitors. Our venues would benefit immensely from the kind of investment seen in other thriving cities where resources for noise mitigation help sustain a vibrant and stable cultural ecosystem. In the end, I'm here to encourage an approach to the necessary updates that is thoughtful and collaborative to minimize unintended consequences and maximize practicality and effectiveness.
1 minute.
I support the recommendation to defer the implementation of the specific authorities that were mentioned until they can be more thoroughly addressed through the upcoming noise bylaw review with input from industry experts and stakeholders. There is no shortage of organizations and individuals who are eager to help in this regard and who are aligned on the vision of a city that is both livable and vibrant. I see strategic policy development in collaboration with cultural and entertainment sectors as laying the groundwork that will allow us to nurture a thriving arts and culture scene, build a strong nightlife economy, and support the city's long-term growth. Thanks again for your time and consideration.
Thank you for yours. We appreciate your delegation this morning. I do have a question from my colleague, Councillor Devine. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Way to hold through, Genevieve, there as a couple dozen little mini elephants walked into the room. Hello, everybody. Hello, kiddos. You're here to watch how the city conducts business. Hey, it's so obviously I'm hearing a repeated pattern
Yes.
on at least two of those concerns, but I appreciate hearing the perspective from someone who runs a venue. So can I ask, I can assume that, you know, the consequence or the impact on your business of being required to procure, and forgive me if I get this wrong, a sound engineering acoustic report, I can assume that the consequence on you is a financial one, I believe you said several thousands of dollars.
Yes, that's what was stated in the
Can you help?
report.
And if I correct me if I'm wrong, would the passing of this bylaw as recommended mean that it's mandatory, you must therefore go out and seek such a report for your venue?
I think that this is what is expressed in the report is that there is the authority is given to the chief license inspector to mandate this kind of report, and I think that this is where there is a lack of experience and expertise that could it makes it a little bit discretionary.
Of course. And on the other item, the ability or the power to have a venue relocate its sound equipment. Can you help me paint a picture of what that concern might mean in practical terms for someone who runs a venue? Does it mean that, because I heard somebody make reference to, there is a venue that recently spent a lot of money on custom installed, custom made equipment. Is the concern from venue that bylaw can come in and say, those got to go there? Or is it that you can't have that equipment? Can you paint a picture of what the implication of such a recommendation would be on a venue?
Well, again, like I think that it's a bit unclear what the bylaw inspector would be able to mandate. Is just like the type of relocation or rearrangement. I think that the impact would vary depending on the venue and the type of equipment in use and location, right? Whether it's installed in the wall, whether, it's easily movable. And so I think that the key issue here is the ambiguity and, yeah.
So it's not necessarily the devil you know, but the devil you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I go to Vice Chair Hill, I just want to recognize our guests who are here today from St. Jean-Paul II School. Welcome. This is the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee. We are a standing committee of Ottawa City Council, and we oversee the Ottawa Fire Services, the Ottawa Paramedic Service, Ottawa Bylaw and Regulatory Service, and Emergency Preparedness. And today we're talking about potential changes to food establishment premises, so places that serve and or sell and or prepare food. So maybe not the most exciting issue for everyone in our great city, but it's important to keep the public safe and healthy at all times when we buy food or consume food. So that's what we're discussing here today. So you're welcome to stay as long as you want, but we ask that all of our guests today remain respectful and quiet while the committee conducts its business. So you're always welcome here at City Hall, your City Hall. Vice Chair Hill, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jean, for the presentation. Assuming that you're able to get all of the permits that you need in due course in order to operate the art house in the way that you would wish, could you describe for me some of the programming that you would run for students that are in the grade 5 range?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, we are an all ages venue, and so a lot of our events, including live music and game nights. We have board game nights featuring DJs would be open and very happy to welcome many students that are sitting here today.
Thank you very much. I think it's important to note that the business we do here impacts everybody positively. So thank you, Geneviève.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Conseiller Plante.
Oui, merci. Je voulais juste savoir, c'était quoi la situation où vous avez dépensé 70 000 $? C'était quoi, comme j'ai pas trop compris, là, c'était quoi les rénovations que vous avez dû faire?
OK, donc c'était relié à, au building code.
OK.
Donc, if I may continue in English.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
There was, let's call it an oversight at the time of the renovations before we started our business in terms of building code and occupancy classification. And in order for us to have the capacity numbers that would make the business viable, we were not the correct occupancy classification. And we had to change this occupancy classification, which meant that we had to make some changes to the building related to washrooms change also the building classification, which can only happen through a building permit.
Got it. Okay. So would you have had to do that, say if it was like owner occupied kind of how, like I'm just, it seems like something you would have had to do anyways, or maybe I'm misreading the situation.
I mean, had it been done correctly from the beginning,
right,
we would not have had to do it later on, and it would not have been put on the business.
Right.
It could have easily been done at the beginning from the property owner.
Of course.
And the business had to take on.
Of course. And I was just wondering too, because I have obviously a very dense ward, and there's people, and Jake, you're going to shake your head here. There's people who live amongst our many music venues and our cafes turned music venues, et cetera. And it sometimes causes, in French, we say les problèmes de cohabitation, right? Like so I was just wondering, have you personally, has your place had any noise complaints, or this was just something you did just to stay compliant?
It was something that we did to stay viable, just because of our occupancy classification it was kind of an unusual one. And our number of seats were actually quite low for the size of the space. So again, we were not restricted by the area of operation. We were restricted exclusively by number of bathrooms, and increasing the number of bathrooms would actually the area that we had indoors would allow for double the amount of patrons comfortably.
Okay. And I guess my final question is, do you or any of your staff live near the venue?
Yes.
Okay. So that generally then get an idea of what it's like in the neighborhood and why you have to do these things. I find sometimes the people who are advocating one way or another, they don't necessarily live near the area that's being affected. So I'm happy to hear that you do, because then
we do, and we have happy neighbors, and I don't think that we've been an overly problematic venue, and even with the increased capacity that we've managed, it has not been a nuisance to the neighborhood. And we don't have lineups outside and things like that. It's still a very comfortable kind of space, but it was necessary for us to be sustainable.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to if ever you want to reach out and chat about this, I have similar venues in my area. So I'm always happy to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help some fellow venue owners.
Hey, merci beaucoup.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your questions. That concludes questions for you. So thank you for your delegation. We appreciate it. Next, we have Mateus Munoz. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Sure. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Matias Munoz. I'm a longtime member of the music community here in Ottawa. and the owner of Phono, a new event space located in the heart of Centertown, Ottawa on Bronson. I'm here to address some similar concerns with the new enforcement tools related to this review. As a business owner who has just navigated the gauntlet of opening a brick and mortar space downtown in this climate, I want to share the practical reality of what these proposed changes mean for people like myself. Starting a business is always a risk calculation. Between record high rents, thin margins, and the hundreds of thousands of dollars often required, as in my case, to retrofit a music venue or an event space, the hurdles are already immense. By introducing enforcement tools like mandated equipment relocation or mandatory acoustic reports that can cost, as stated, thousands of dollars, this fundamentally changes the risk calculation. When a prospective owner looks at Ottawa versus another city to start a business, they aren't just looking at the market. They're looking for stability. These measures create a compliance moving target, as I see it. If the rules of the game can change overnight, requiring us to tear out custom-built infrastructure at our own expense, many entrepreneurs will simply choose to invest elsewhere. Or worst of all, not invest in an event space or music venue at all. This isn't just a business risk. For many of us, it's a threat to our personal financial survival. We don't open these music venues for the money. That's difficult enough to achieve. We do it because these spaces are sacred to the cultural fabric of our city. We are passionate about the arts. We want to make Ottawa a more vibrant and desirable destination for residents, for students, and for tourists. We want to help build the nightlife economy that the city has prioritized. We want to be compliant, but we cannot do that effectively if the threat of catastrophic expenses is hanging over our heads without a transparent and data-driven process to resolve these conflicts. I spent years in the Ottawa music community. I have seen the potential firsthand of the people in the city. And without grassroots arts venues, it becomes much more difficult for the arts community to thrive. I use the word catastrophic. I mean it literally. The most small music venues operate on razor-thin margins. An unbudgeted $20,000 engineering report or mandate to move a hardwired sound system is an immediate insolvency event. We are talking about padlocks on doors and empty storefronts downtown, and I'm not being alarmist here. This is just the reality. If we lose spaces due to vague policy, they don't just relocate, they vanish completely, and the local economy suffers. So to be specific about the impact on my business, as I see it, relocating the equipment, as Genevieve stated as well, it's not like moving furniture. It involves electrical rewiring, oftentimes structural changes to the building, and potentially moving the sound issue from one neighbor's wall who's complaining to another's, and it can cause a cascading effect down that road. Acoustic reports, again, as stated, can cost tens of thousands of dollars. For a small venue, this is a hidden tax that can bankrupt us before we've even had a chance to achieve compliance.
1 minute.
We want to be your partners. We want to be good neighbors. And we want to be able to be at the table to helping you find solutions that actually work. My recommendation, building upon previous recommendations of delegates, is one, to advance the broader positive licensing updates that streamline processes for small businesses. This is great progress. Two, to temporarily hold the implementation of the two expanded activity provisions regarding equipment relocation and mandatory acoustic reports. And three, address these items through a thorough and dedicated noise bylaw review in collaboration with the business community and Ottawa Music Industry Coalition and Nightlife Office. This allows for meaningful consultation that the industry has been asking for. Thank you very much, and happy to answer your questions.
Thank you for your delegation. We do have a question from Vice Chair Hill. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Mateus, for your delegation. And certainly I'm sympathetic to supporting our small businesses across the city and all of their domains. And I'm concerned when I hear terms like catastrophic. So certainly we'll be looking at some of the recommendations that you suggested. I just want to confirm that I understand what you're saying. Are you suggesting that the change concern you have is the change in policy to implement the content of this report? Is that the change? Or are you referring to the fact that by adopting this report, it will set the conditions for a long-term and sustained period of instability?
That is correct. The latter of your point there. Really, having these tools become part of the way that we have to operate. It really throws us into a place where there's a lot of one person down the street that has a very low tolerance for any noise whatsoever in the neighborhood can cause this catastrophic, like I said, series of cascading events where we may have to relocate sound equipment. We may have to pay for all this stuff. And to be honest, it's not clear to us how we're supposed to adequately face this. People like myself and Geneviève are trying to approach compliance in a way that is, from the get-go. I have, installed solid corridors. I've done everything I can to ensure containment of the sound in my venue, but I feel as though these measures that are being suggested here just cause a lot of uncertainty in terms of how the future would go for running my business.
Okay, message received. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are no other questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your delegation. Next, we have James Scott McKillop. Good morning. You have up to 5 minutes as well.
Good morning. Nano Food Tech Experiment in the Ottawa Smart City. Are Ottawa restaurants and other permitted eateries aware? Slide 2. Everything I'm showing you here today is regarding the biodigital convergence, otherwise known as the Nano Bio Info Cogno Experiment. Nano for nanotech, bio for biotech, info for IT, and cognitive for cognitive science. Slide 3. Nanotechnology products derived from nanotech have a wide range of applications in both the health and food sectors. Slide 4. Health products and food branch involved with nanotech. HPFB participates in the Health Portfolio Nanotech Working Group. Members include Health Canada, Public Health Agency of Canada, Canada Institutes of Health and Research, and Industry Canada. Slide 5. Health Canada participates in a number of international initiatives, such as the Working Party on Manufactured Nanomaterials of the OECD and Technical Committee 229 of the ISO, and collaborates with international counterparts. Slide 6. Meet Francois Collier, member of the IEC and ISO and the Standards Council of Canada. Francois is responsible for international standards, IoT, digital twins, and biodigital convergence. Slide 7. Biodigital convergence overlaps with smart farming. Slide 8. Relevant standards from ISO include Technical Committee 276 on biotech, TC 34 on molecular biomarkers, food and agriculture, and ISO Strategic Advisory Group on smart farming. Slide 9, meet Crystal van der Elst, Director General Policy Horizons Canada and former head of strategic foresight at the World Economic Forum. Slide 10.
Mr. McKillop, I'm just going to jump in just for 1 second. I've asked the committee coordinator to stop the clock just to reserve your time. We're here to discuss the food premises licensing review, the bylaw update.
Yes, we are. And I have some recommendations for that. And this is all regarding the food that we're eating at these restaurants. Thank you.
I want to make sure that your comments are related to the review and the bylaw changes.
They are related to everything restaurant owners are currently feeding Ottawa residents. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Slide 10 I was at, I believe. Precision and smart farming uses a combination of technologies to influence and alter how agriculture industries functions, including using robots, data optimizing fertilizer inputs, and blockchain-enabled origin tracing. Slide 11. Biodigital innovations modified how we produce food, integrate new types of food, and disrupt existing supply chains, including lab-grown food. Slide 12. Another thing I don't accept is CRISPR-modified crops, cultured meat, individualized diets based on DNA profiling, and nutrigenomics. Slide 13. Tiny Tech solves to tackles big problems. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada scientist Dr. Justin Pahara is working on a new crop treatment that will target insects with nanomaterials to track them with 3D images. Slide 14. NRC capabilities in food, written in 2016 with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Slide 15.
I'm just jumping in again. We have a point of order. Sorry to interrupt your presentation. Point of order.
This is fascinating. I'm not denying that. I just don't understand what it has to do with the subject at hand.
Well, if you let me finish, we would get to that.
So I'm going to ask that you get to address the matter that's before the committee today. If you're not able to address the matter before,
I am addressing all matters of food, and that you're giving out new license agreements here. Okay, now, if I personally was serving nanotech food from my home, which I don't obviously need a license from reading your new license agreement, I would inform restaurant owner, I would inform the people eating my food that they're eating nanotech. Okay. Now, I realize you don't want to do that, but your new license agreement should come with labeling for both the restaurant owners and the patrons eating there.
First of all, don't interrupt me as the chair when I'm trying to discuss this matter with you, number one. Second, I don't believe you're addressing the issue before us today. But to save the committee time this morning, I'm going to let you finish. You've got 2 minutes left. Go ahead.
Could we go right to actually slide 20? Smart solutions for food safety. Devices include molecular-based diagnostics, photonic sensors, and handheld devices, printable electronics, RFID sensors, smart polymer films, graphene nanomaterials, and nanomaterials for molecular sensing of food, all done for big data analytics. Slide 21. Contact Laura O'Connor for more info on dangerous food tech. Slide 22. Emerging Technologies Laboratory, research done here to design, develop, and test new tools that can detect bacteria and viruses, parasites, and food using lab on a chip. Slide 23. University of Alberta researchers improve 3D printability of plant protein. 3D food printing creates customized foods with specialized printers. Slide 24. This study was done by the Faculty of Agriculture and Life Environment Sciences. Slide 25. Funded by the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, although 3D printing pea proteins with plasma is far from natural. Slide 26. In May 2022, the Ottawa Smart Farms launched by the City of Ottawa and Invest Ottawa. Slide 27. Gordon J. Wallace, farmer in residence at the Ottawa Smart Farm and owner of GPS Ontario. Slide 28. GPS Ontario uses data to gather, map, and monitor. They call it planting with precision. Slide 29. Meet Shabuik Unadegwe at U of O, where he works with food biochemistry and food nanotech. Slide 31. Slide 31. His research takes a chemical sciences approach in exploring food and health using emerging technologies, sustainable value-added processing, and alternative proteins. Slide 32. Everything I've shown you today is part of the biodigital convergence. Do licensed restaurant owners in Ottawa even know this is happening? I've spoken to several. They don't. None of them had any idea this was going on. I recommend that all new licenses should come with labeling requirements where they both educate the owners and patrons of the tech they're currently being force-fed by the City of Ottawa. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any questions for your delegation today, so we will continue with our next delegate, Fareed Daher.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Fareed, and for more than a decade, I've operated several nightlife venues in Ottawa, including most recently 221 Rideau. So many of you know this building has been part of Ottawa's music landscape for decades, and most recently known as the location for Mavericks. About a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, we reopened it as Gridworks with the goal of reinvesting in it and operating it in a modern and responsible way. But shortly after opening, noise complaints began. From the beginning, we took those complaints very seriously. Acting on the advice of sound experts, we invested close to $100,000 in different phases into sound-related improvements. So insulation of select walls, ceilings, sound system re-engineering, including cardioid and noise canceling configuration, and even extensive operational controls. Despite all this, complaints continued. We were really puzzled, professionally conducted volume measurements in front of the venue in the back, on the roof, didn't reconcile with the frequency of the bylaw visits. So we consulted specialized acoustics engineers. Their position was that low frequency sound in dense urban environments like Rideau can behave unpredictably, and that resolving them requires precise data. Specifically, complaint locations and timing to assess, one, the contribution of mitigation measures so far and explore what to prioritize next. Otherwise, any further action is speculative. So that information, which had been requested for nearly a year now, and we've been waiting for close to 4 months to proceed with the acoustic study that we volunteered to do, was never asked of us so far. No information yet. So just for clarity, the information was requested through the legal disclosure process, which has led to multiple court adjournments, maybe a dozen so far, paying all the legal fees, multiple court adjournments, not due because of any delay or actions on our part, but because the disclosure that is due has not been provided. In parallel, the information was also requested through several friendly meetings with bylaw leadership who have been listening and expressed willingness to cooperate, but they haven't been able to provide any actionable data, likely due to privacy reasons of the complaints and maybe not to affect the matters that are before the courts. The only meaningful indication that we've been able to gather via our own channels and some industry partners is that recent complaints may be concentrated from one single unit on a high floor apartment in a building behind us. Without the data, we cannot confirm whether the issue is isolated to that unit or broader. And that distinction is extremely critical because it determines what type of response is appropriate at this point, and in an extreme scenario, whether there is a viable solution, if that's possible. So what this highlights is even when an operator is acting in good faith, at the moment, there may not be a path for a solution. At the same time, enforcement is continuing and escalating. A few months ago, we opened a second venue on the second floor of that building, previously known as DCUF. So a different corporation, different liquor license, and a different lease, which had been previously contracted. So shortly after opening, bylaw began finding this venue as well. So we're now facing potential non-renewal of our licenses for both of these venues, while the legal process remains stalled and unresolved. Our reputation's affected, energy's low, we're acting defensively instead of proactively, and we're not really creating entertainment at this stage, we're just lobbying for it to survive. So this raises a fundamental question. Are we creating a system right now that leads to resolution in scenarios like this? Consider also the resources. Each complaint, even if hypothetically is coming from the same resident, triggers a full response. Over the past year, we've had maybe 100 bylaw visits, and our only option is to fight them in court. So is this system producing meaningful outcomes? And this becomes especially relevant in the context of the measures that we're talking about today. More power, so mandating relocation of sound equipment, which experts would tell you would not affect low frequency sounds, and requiring professional acoustic reports for other venues. In principle, they're appropriate, but our experience shows that without a defined solution-driven process, there is a huge risk. So we need the data, and we need a collaboration for the city to collaborate with sound experts as well. So we're actively being asked to produce these reports, which cost, in our case, over $10,000 without the work that would be needed, but we don't have the data for them to lead to a solution. So the risk is responsible operators invest heavily, but don't have the means to resolve the issue. Most venues would have probably closed or given up. I really think this points to a broader policy gap, and I agree with most of the delegations today. These are fundamental noise and acoustic issues, yet they're being addressed through a licensing framework than rather than through a proper bylaw review with clear standards, thresholds, and processes. So my recommendation is to halt the implementation of sound-related enforcement tools until they can be properly addressed through a noise bylaw review with industry consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation this morning. I do have a question from my colleague, Councillor Devine.
Hello, Fareed. Thank you for your delegation. I think the questions I have with regards to what you raised, I'll probably have those questions more for staff and for yourself, but I'm just trying to get absolute clarity on the concern you're facing here. And I was speaking to some, of the other delegates who I think are aware of your situation and are aware of how your situation is perhaps an example of why these changes are being proposed. Can I just get clear understanding? Are you saying that you have obviously been required to hire consultants to solve a problem, but are you saying that because you cannot get specific information from the city, then you are not able to specifically address the problem? Is that basically what you're saying?
Almost, I'll clarify. I have a hearing in April where I will be required to hire the acoustics engineers. I have tried to hire them without it being a requirement. It was more so of an internal, voluntary solution. But I was not able, or they proposed that it would be a great risk to do this job at that stage because it will likely provide speculative kind of feedback or speculative report that is not going to resolve a complicated acoustic situation like one in dense areas. I want to say that when there is a real issue, a lot of times it's environmental and low frequency sounds. They can be amplified with distance. They can bounce off buildings. So moving speakers around or just paying to have a report without what is it that we're trying to resolve is not a solution.
So can I ask you a hypothetical question? And by hypothetical, it's because I suspect you don't have the accurate information to pinpoint from where the problem is coming, but you've made allusions to if hypothetically the problem were coming from one pinpointed area, if hypothetically. Can I ask if you were able to procure that information and if it was demonstrated through the data that the problem was coming from one specific complainant focused on one specific area of your establishment, is it even feasible that you could make alterations and or improvements that would allay that problem?
Absolutely, and that's why these acoustic studies exist. And I've expressed that if we can confirm that in the last 3-4 months that these complaints are coming from one unit, we want to go ahead with the work. But we can't go ahead with the work and then realize that there was another one on the other side of the street, or there was one on, north or whatnot. So I think this is just an extreme case where even when the venue is willing to invest because there's so much on the line, that the report without a solution-driven process where there is some sort of transparency to collaborate might lead to nothing.
And just so I can understand, because I want to have faith that if it were pinpointed where the problem came from, that you could address it, as opposed to just complain back, why am I going through all these hoops because of one complainant? As briefly as possible, if I handed you a report that said all the problems are coming from this specific location, it's that corner of your bar that is the problem, as briefly as possible, what kind of solution could you put in place to amend that?
Yeah, Mr. Devine, like the amount of white hair I grew this year from trying to resolve this issue, if somebody was to hand me this report, I would immediately perform the study. And with that study, I would immediately know that this is the solution. These are the phases of the solution. Or I would immediately know that this is not a viable space for, whatever environment. We've even jokingly, but seriously mentioned that if it is one unit, we'd be happy to take on the rent for that unit and help a person relocate if they're willing, just so that we can buy time to resolve the issue. This is the extreme of a situation of a sound issue.
All right. Thank you very much, Fareed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Kelly, you have a question. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for your delegation. It was extremely well spoken and detailed, and I found it impactful. It sounds like you've been through quite a rigmarole to try and deal with this. So when you have had conversations with the city or bylaw in regards to these issues, based on what I've heard you discuss, you've requested the locations where the complaints are coming from primarily, and they have refused to give you that information?
They've often said, let us get back to you. And without coming back to us with the information. I think there's also, and this is part of why I'm recommending a thorough process, a complaint or numerous complaints a year ago are irrelevant for us today because of the amount of mitigation work done. So what we're asking is what's happening the last few 3, 4, 5 months. And I again, I mentioned it in the delegation. I think there's maybe a hesitancy because of privacy and because they don't want to affect anything that's before the courts. But this thing has become so heavy that it's even difficult to provide adequate disclosure. Bylaws under extreme pressure. I know the councillor's office, the mayor's office is involved, the BIA is involved, the night mayor's office is involved. Everybody's feeling the pressure. So I honestly don't know where this will go. But yeah, like definitely information hasn't been.
My assumption would be that there would be privacy and other legal reasons why they can't release specific information to you, but they have not expressed that specifically to you in any of their correspondence.
Indirectly, I think the recommendation is always to get it through the courts, but the prosecution seems to be maybe overwhelmed or maybe not having adequate information at this stage. And I mentioned one thing in the delegation is I really think the city and bylaw should collaborate with industry experts to maybe get some consultation on how to resolve this faster, because what I'm seeing is maybe we're confirming that the venue is open when these complaints are happening, but we're not necessarily using data or science-based way to measure if they are genuine or not. At least I don't expect that for every sound complaint, but in a scenario like ours, this would be helpful. So yeah. I think that gap has made it really difficult even through the courts for us to get the information that we need. And closing is not really an option because we're invested in this, and there's 100+ people that live off this, and this is one of the primary places for people to dance and experience live music in the Byward Market at the moment, or on Rideau.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll certainly have some more questions for staff and follow up to some of the things that you've delegated on today. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for your delegation today, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you. Next, we have Kwende Kafance. Good morning, sir. You have up to 5 minutes. Just press the button there. There you go.
Thanks. Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Kwende Kafense. I am a board member with the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition, as well as the Ottawa Film Office, and I work professionally across Ottawa's cultural sector as a producer, performer, and consultant. I should also mention that I'm also a former city staffer who produced and contributed to many committee reports myself, so I want to shout out the city staff to my right. I know I've been in that chair. I know what that's about. I'm here both as a partner to the city's broader cultural and economic development work, and as somebody who's directly impacted by how these policies play out on the ground, both because I'm a performer, I'm a bit downstream from the owners of the venues, but I'm somebody who is contracted to perform in these venues, and also I work as a consultant with many venues. in different capacities. I want to begin by recognizing that there are positive elements in the report, particularly the single licensing category for music and cultural programming, and I think that that's important, but I do believe that there is some fragmentation, and that's broadly what I want to talk about, is that, we are introducing policies without some of the complementary policy frameworks needed to ensure that they're applied consistently, transparently, and proportionally. And, not only that we have, and this has been mentioned before, like, the challenge of the discretionary application without some of the clearly identified thresholds or escalation pathways, and just the increased risk of uncertainty and potential cost. As has been mentioned, I think we're looking for similar things, myself and some of the other delegates, in terms of, having more clear definition about what constitutes a repeated violation, like a number of times, or having sort of a little bit more quantitative clarity around that, standardized thresholds as it relates to how these measures are measured and triggered, having a more clear escalation framework and having a more defined pathway for remediation before costs are imposed. So understanding like where that line is for business owners. And I think that all of that will improve it will improve predictability and compliance across the sector. But I do want to situate this in a broader context, and it's the notion that Ottawa is currently investing heavily, not only in downtown revitalization, but also in the way that we grow and develop our cultural and creative industries to leverage their economic value, their tourism value, and their social cohesion value. There's been a lot of talk about downtown, but this isn't just limited to downtown. This is happening across the city. I know Councillor Luloff mentioned that these things are happening at his ward in the east. I've certainly played out there and been engaged with venues out there. And it's happening in our rural regions as well. These kinds of regulatory uncertainties affect how and where cultural entrepreneurs choose to operate across the entire city. So it's not just a downtown issue, it's a broad issue that affects, the whole sector. Business owners, they shape decisions about opening a venue or investing in the space or upgrading equipment or even continuing at all based on predictability and the regulatory environment, as Genevieve and Matthias, rightly mentioned. And so and this connects, I guess, in some ways to a recent op-ed that I wrote in the Ottawa Business Journal about how we coordinate all of our efforts across the city. And I think that's one of the broad issues that I want to raise here, that on one hand, we're saying that culture is essential to city building and economic growth. And then on the other hand, we introduce conditions that make it harder for entrepreneurs to design and operate spaces predictably that are fit for purpose. These policies don't just regulate noise, they shape whether cultural businesses can exist or do exist and how they're designed really from the ground up based on the regulatory environment.
1 minute.
Thanks. As I said, this misalignment is a real risk and it applies citywide. And it's something that the sector is really organizing to try and work with the city to mitigate. Across music, nightlife, and broader cultural industries, there's a growing level of coordination, professionalism, and investment. Organizations, venue operators, and cultural workers are actively working to build sustainable businesses and contribute to the city's economic and cultural life. And if we're being asked to grow, invest, and help drive activity across the city, then we do need a regulatory framework that coordinates and allows us to do that with confidence. The solution here is not to remove enforcement tools, it's to pair them with clear modern policy frameworks that reflect how other cities are managing and how we need to balance and also balance broad competitiveness with other places. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. Appreciate that very much. Any questions for this delegate? Seeing none, thank you for your time today. Thank you, sir. Okay, our 9th delegate is Alex Maltby. Good morning. Like everyone else, you have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, I will try to be brief. I feel like I'll make more friends if I'm brief. I'm not going to be redundant and repeat things, but I'll try to reinforce some of the points that have already been made. I'm wearing 2 hats today. One is representing my organization, Arts Ottawa, And we firmly believe that arts and culture is not a nice to have or supplementary to, but is a foundational component of civic infrastructure and our social lives. And I'm also here as just myself. I have extensive experience as a musician and as a sound technician, event and concert booker, talent booker, promoter in small and mid-sized venues throughout the city. Many of these are cafes or brunch spots by day, and by night become cultural and community hubs and incubators for the next generation of artists in our community. I've dealt with bylaw officers many times and have honestly never really had any issues. And I think this is because our spaces have always been managed in a respectful, professional, and community-oriented way. It's not controversial to say that space is a central issue and challenge for our local arts community, specifically around affordable, consistent, sustainable, and familiar spaces, particularly within the performing arts. The ambiguity of the language in some of these proposals is alarming and further undermines the agency and predictability of what is already such a precarious and exhausting labor of love for anyone involved in event production. Like my colleagues, there is this incoherence in the language around the relocation of speakers, which demonstrates a lack of familiarity or expertise in the running of an entertainment venue, particularly because speakers, as has been mentioned, are often hardwired or to the walls, which then creates an additional public safety risk. And fails, as another delegate has mentioned, fails to resolve any specific issues around frequencies and identifying maybe it's something around 200 hertz that is actually bleeding through or transferring to adjacent properties. And so I'm just simply urging council to reconsider, to consider the comments of my fellow delegates and revise and include language that is consistent with the real needs of these spaces. And this can be meaningfully achieved through consultation with interest holders in the community. And this is not only to support and not penalize existing spaces, but also to not de-incentivize perspective and entrepreneurial activity that can further innovate and contribute to our local cultural sector. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much for your delegation. I'll see if there are any questions. Vice Chair Hill.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a question generally for, I think, the delegates that are still here listening, but yourself as well. We're going to have an opportunity to talk to staff after you're finished about some of the general concerns that we've heard and themes. We may not solve all those issues today in committee. But this report's going to come to council in about a week and a half's time. Okay, so we've got between now and then to address the issues, to fix the low-hanging fruit, and to make some adjustments that may need to be made. Okay, so I just want to highlight the importance of probably the next 3 days of this week to do the business we need to do in order to make some of these issues land. Okay.
Thank you. Not a question, but thank you for raising that with our delegates. I don't see any other questions for you, so thank you for coming today. We appreciate your time and the time of all delegates who have either written or presented today in person or virtually. So thank you to everyone. Now we will enter into the question period for staff. I have asked the general manager to just provide an opening comment and response to some of the concerns that we've heard today from members, the delegates that we've heard, and then I'll take questions from members of the committee. So please go ahead, General Manager.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to provide a comment before we take questions. So this is just a reminder to members of committee that this review is focused specifically on food premises licensing, rather than a broader review of the noise bylaw or amusement licensing. Where there is overlap, it is simply to streamline our processes. Businesses that operate as both a food premises and an amusement venue would require only one license instead of two. Tools such as relocating sound equipment and requiring an engineer plan are for cases of ongoing non-compliance and to support compliance with the existing noise bylaw. And it's not the city's practice to comment on matters that are before the court. A comprehensive review of the noise bylaw itself is anticipated as part of the next term of council's bylaw review work plan. Importantly, These measures are not new. They already exist through the application of license conditions. The proposed updates would simply allow bylaw and regulatory services to apply conditions more efficiently without requiring a license committee step in the infrequent cases where issues persist. This helps improve responsiveness while maintaining oversight and supporting businesses in achieving compliance. So with that, maybe I'll just turn it over to Samantha to see if she might have some other comments as well.
Thank you, Ryan. I would perhaps just note that as part of our review, we did review similar bylaws in other municipalities, and we looked quite a bit at Toronto, where they actually require a phase 1 noise mitigation plan as a requirement to obtain any license for these types of establishments, and then delegate the authority to the chief license inspector to require that professional engineer's report as a second step. And so in considering our approach, we looked at that and certainly considered it, but recognized that with most of these establishments, there aren't issues, or when there are issues, they are dealt with through our education-based enforcement. And so we didn't necessarily think it was appropriate to require this extra administrative hurdle of a phase 1 report for all licensees, but we did reserve that extra measure of a professional engineer's report for, again, these cases, that the outliers where there has been chronic non-compliance. And so that's how we've ended up here today. And again, these are enforcement measures that are specific to these food premises that have expanded activities, and they are recommendations that we are making in light of the provisions of the new zoning bylaw, which allow the expansion of these businesses. We want these businesses to expand within Ottawa, and as a result of the new zoning bylaw, these businesses will be allowed to establish in areas where they haven't currently, or they haven't previously existed. And so these tools are providing extra flexibility to allow us to address those problèmes de cohabitation that Councillor Plante was talking about as that transition happens. Again, appreciating that a comprehensive noise bylaw review is likely in the city's near future.
Okay, thank you, staff, for providing that additional information and context. Questions then from colleagues. Vice Chair Hill, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could staff comment to what the impacts would be if there was to be a temporary hold on the expanded activity provisions until the noise bylaw is managed next term?
Mr. Chair, it would, I imagine in that instance, perhaps my colleague can speak to it more, but in that instance, if these reports were required, he could continue to seek to impose that as a requirement through the licensing appeals committee, as he currently does.
Thank you, Sam. And through you, Mr. Chair, at this time, it really just makes the process a lot more efficient for situations of chronic noncompliance.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to go a little all over the map because I took a lot of notes here. So I will just refer back to the comments I think that were just made to summarize the assessment of some of the delegates in terms of the specificity of this report to food services. But my understanding from the report is that we are a bit more broad than that. Like, this does speak to entertainment. I mean, we've seen a number of members from the entertainment industry come and do delegations to express their concerns. So I think there is a bit of a disconnect there. Could you speak to the entertainment component of what this report addresses and governs so that we can make sure that we're not inadvertently undermining some of the economic development objectives that we have?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. Perhaps to provide some additional context, there are currently, I believe, 189 licensed amusement places in Ottawa, and 170 of those are food premises as well. So there's a very large overlap between the food premise licensees and the amusement place licensees. The majority of those licensees are in fact both. And so this started out as a food premises license review, and that has been certainly the work that we have been undertaking in the last several months. And as part of that review, we heard that there are issues with these expanded activity food premises specific to noise complaints and patron management. And so that's how this sort of fed into this category. And then again, because we are looking at these amendments for food premises, we felt that it would be appropriate to include the same requirements for amusement places to ensure consistency between the two licensing categories.
So could you clarify for me then, in terms of the requirement for a license, entertainment license, would having a DJ or a live guitarist coming in on a weekend, would that obligate a separate permit, or would that be encapsulated for a restaurant owner in their normal operations?
Through you, Mr. Chair. And in these situations, Councillor, live music being held in a restaurant later in the evening would require a place of amusement license.
And Chair, if I could just add, and that's part of the recommendation today, that in a scenario where you have both a food premise and an amusement license, you wouldn't have to apply for both categories anymore. You would have one license.
So if I was a restaurateur, I would apply for my food permit, and that would include a section that incorporates having live music come on the weekend.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. So our recommendations is the consolidation under the expanded activity food premise license. So for locations that are principally a food premise that host these extra activities like live music, they would then enjoy the benefit of applying for that expanded activity food premise license class, and that would be covered under that one singular license, yes.
Okay, and should I wish to do that, would I then have multiple inspectors coming, fire marshal, et cetera, because I've got different components to my restaurant, or would I see that get consolidated and perhaps more efficient?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Chair. Through the consolidated process, it would require one inspection from bylaw services as a result versus multiple.
Okay, and that consolidation is articulated in this report. That is the change that is being recommended, is that we're going to go from an environment where we have multiple potential inspections that could be considered redundant to an environment where we would consolidate that and have one inspection. That's what this report is saying. That's what we are going to vote on. That's what's going to happen May 31st if this goes forward, is that there will be one fire inspection instead of three for a restaurant that has live music, et cetera.
Through you, Mr. Chair, rather than having multiple licenses, it'll be one license for these types of situations with singular inspections.
Okay, thank you. We heard comment about home-based food handling, and I think an agreement that there's not a regulation component that's desired there, as that would perhaps be significant on them, but an interest in a food handling certification, which is inexpensive and fairly easy to do. Is that something that this report would support, or that we're not speaking to, or that we care about?
Mr. Chair, the certification would potentially fall outside of the scope of this review, because we aren't recommending that we impose a licensing requirement, and therefore the enforcement of that food handling certification, our mechanism to do that would be through licensing those businesses potentially. So it's not something that we're proposing at this time.
Okay. And are there like provincial or federal regulations that go with food handling in general? I'm just thinking about a home-based business that would cook up some food for a celebration in the park or something like that, and then a bunch of people getting food poisoning. Like, is there other standards that would help us to prevent a circumstance like that from happening?
So, Mr. Chair, part of the reason we're recommending exempting these businesses from the licensing requirement is that they continue to be subject to inspection and regulation through Ottawa Public Health. And I would again perhaps qualify that these are specific to low-risk foods, which tend to be more baked goods that don't need to be temperature controlled. And so to the extent that there are home-based food-based businesses that are preparing high-risk foods, those are not permitted. They are not permitted through zoning, and they're not, it's my understanding they're not currently permitted through the health, the HPPA, the provincial legislation.
We heard from one of the delegates a concern that one noise complaint could cause thousands of dollars in expenses to businesses. Could you just walk me through what we are about to approve in terms of how that relates to the complaint process? And is it actually realistic that one complaint could in fact trigger a situation where a business needs to incorporate thousands of dollars in capital expenses in order to change their internal systems in terms of noise?
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. One noise complaint in a situation like this wouldn't trigger these extra enforcement mechanisms that we're looking at. These are situations of chronic noncompliance where we would try to impose these extra conditions or extra powers. Currently, one noise complaint is not going to require a sound mitigation report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Skalski.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a couple of questions. So in terms of the food premise and the amusement licenses, so you mentioned 170, 189. I'm thinking about all the businesses that, run a trivia night or have a person come in and play a guitar a few times. I don't think they even recognize that there's an amusement license requirement at all. Do we have an idea of how many more businesses could be captured if this became a single streamlined item?
I don't have an exact number for you. I would perhaps clarify that food premises can continue to just be licensed as food premises, that these would be specific to those businesses that are operating as both. And I would also say that there are further, to the point of the delegation that we heard here today with respect to the definition of amusement place. That's one of the things that we are looking at in the context of our broader overall licensing bylaw review, which will be coming forward in May. So there will be sort of additional clarity provided to businesses about when this license is required. But I don't have a number to provide you.
Okay, so if I'm a restaurant today that runs trivia night every now and then, and I only have a food premise license, or let's say you have a guy come and play guitar every now and then in the corner of the room. So you do not have an amusement license because you don't think it's triggered, like nothing has prompted you to go and get one. And you are going in now May, potentially, for renewal of your food premise license. You see this new option called expanded activity license. And then you're prompted to look at it and go, well, what are these activities? And then I imagine the activity, if you're thinking trivia, like the stuff that you just described, would then, I think if I was that business owner, I would be then checking that box. Does that represent a cost, a new cost to this business owner that may not have seen that before?
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Chair, there is a consolidated cost for the second permit, but it comes at a discounted rate.
So what would be the cost today if I was just food premise and tomorrow I'm now food premise expanded?
So currently, you're looking at the combined licenses is $448 with a savings of $130. Currently, my apologies, Councillor, the cost of just the food premise license, there would be $130 extra if you were to buy them separately.
So 200 and something dollars for a food premise license, and now it's 448.
Thank you, Chair. So currently it's $233 for a food premise license and it's $215 for an amusement place license. So the consolidated fee of $448 combines those. The savings comes in the application fee. So as you're now applying for one license instead of two, you're charged the lesser one administrative fee, which is a small savings, but the true savings come from the person coming forward, saving the time of making multiple applications and such.
Okay, so my concern comes in the ambiguity of the definition then, that it then prompts a whole lot more businesses to check that box, and now it increased their cost of their regular operation from 233 to 448. I have another sort of line of questions around like events, or I guess situations like a rural fair where you have food and entertainment. Does anything about these licenses change what they would have to do today?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. What you're describing would typically be our mobile vendors, refreshment stands, mobile canteens and such. They're not within scope of this review, no.
Okay. Okay, well, that's helpful. So that kind of kills that line of questioning. Thank you for now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to follow up with some of the same questions my colleagues asked. And I will start off by saying, I think it's somewhat ironic, I suppose. We're here talking about an expanded food premises license, but we're talking so much more about noise than about food. The one food issue it seems we're talking about is whether or not a home-based business requires safe handling. And you're saying that it's outside the scope of the bylaw, not because it's not merited, but because the bylaw review focused more on something other than that, not on home-based businesses. Yes, indeed. As far as I know, even if I just wanted to operate a community barbecue, myself or whoever flips the wieners has to have a food safe certificate, as far as I know. If the food premises bylaw includes broadly within the scope, does it include broadly within the scope home-based businesses?
Mr. Chair, most home-based food businesses are not permitted. And due to recent changes in the provincial legislation, now home-based food businesses preparing low-risk foods are permitted. And so they are subject to inspection by Ottawa Public Health, and we are not recommending that we license them as a business. It would be a new requirement. Currently, there are no home-based food businesses that are licensed.
But with forgive me if I'm wrong, with the passing of the zoning bylaw, there may soon therefore be, correct?
Only the low-risk food businesses.
But low risk could be baking cookies.
Correct.
Which you can certainly get sick from if they're not handled properly, any food. So can I ask, knowing that even if low risk baking of cookies, just like low risk flipping of hot dogs, if flipping of hot dogs requires a food safe certificate, according to City of Ottawa, as I understand it, why therefore would we not, because we're talking about you're talking about having concern over the imposition of a $25 fee, but we're not talking about having a concern over the imposition of a $200 fee for expanding food premises to amusement. So just so I understand, why would staff not have a concern that anybody baking cookies in their home-based business not have the same kind of safe handling certificate that I think you need for flipping hot dogs?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, if I can address the question. So under the Ontario Health Protection and Promotion Act, as well as its food premise regulation, these home-based food businesses are required to register with the local public health unit. Public health, I don't believe they're here today, can speak to that, but my understanding is their intention is to have an online registration portal for these home-based low-risk food businesses. And on that website, there is information relating to safe food handling, where they could obtain it. But they're currently regulated under different legislation, under the Health Protection and Promotion Act and its food premise regulation.
But they're not required either by the province or by us. The province advises recommendations and guidelines, but not required. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you clarify the question?
I'll move on to a different topic.
Councillor, I'll just say Ottawa Public Health is here. So if there are questions for Ottawa Public Health, I can ask their representative to step forward.
Can I ask, as you walk down, I'll make the question go slow. According to Ottawa Public Health, would somebody operating a home-based business, once it's permitted under zoning, a home-based business to bake cookies and or whatever, low-risk foods, would Ottawa Public Health require that that home-based business have safe food handling certification?
So under the food premise regulation, low risk operators or owners are actually exempt from having by law requirement for food handler training. It's highly encouraged for anyone. You mentioned the barbecuing. They're not required to have it, but it is strongly encouraged. I think it's just that knowledge, that education is important.
All right, thank you. It's not required. I appreciate that. So there is no discrepancy. Thank you very much. Going back to the restaurant that just wants to have the solo guitarist play on the weekend, and they might therefore pay the extra $100 to have the expanded license. Can I assume then that they would be subject to all of the provisions, whether it be, I mean, if they were a repeat violator, that they would be subject to the provisions regarding relocation of equipment and or reports if they were a repeat violator?
The recommendations would be for licensed expanded activity food premises.
So on those, so it's those two issues, those two powers within the expanded bylaw, the possible relocation of equipment and the requirement of acoustic reports. That's what we heard, time and time again from delegates. Can I just get crystal clear clarity on that? Is it staff's recommendation that those conditions only be applied in cases of repeat violations? Because what we heard from delegates was that they had perhaps the fear or the concern that just by being the operator of Art House or by just starting a new cafe, that they would be subject de facto to these provisions, that they might have to, out of nowhere, staff might come in and say, move that there, and where's our acoustic report? Is that not the case?
Chair, we seek compliance through education first. It's only in extreme cases where we see repeated violations where we would consider adding conditions to an existing license.
Okay. Further to my colleague's question about could the definition of repeat violations, as I understood, complaints from one complainant would not be defined as repeat violations. But may I just get clarity on that? Would multiple complaints from one complainant, could that fall into the category of repeat violations that could trigger these powers?
Thank you for the question, Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair. Depending on the situation, they're not always the same. Now, if we had, say, a large gathering of one evening and it resulted in 20 complaints, could that sort of trigger it? I would say no. Repeat offenses would span over a period of time, not just tied to one event.
Yes, repeat offenses over a period of time, but if those repeat offenses are triggered by a singular complainant, would that still fall in the definition of would that trigger these powers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and it possibly could through one complainant.
Okay, and I think that might be the concern that is possibly being raised here. Now, if all of these delegates spoke even out of misunderstood concern about what was in the powers, what was in the language of the bylaw, it does sound to me like to some degree, it might be in the lack of precision of the language of the bylaw. They're all responding to the same concern from, I presume, the same document they read. Between now and council, does staff have any response to what was a collective raising of concern here that might have staff looking at their language and saying, perhaps we weren't clear?
Mr. Chair, we have incorporated flexibility that's consistent with enforcement mechanisms into the report. We will certainly take away what we've heard here today and certainly welcome continuing those conversations.
Thank you. I appreciate the fact that staff have made clear that it's only in extreme cases of repeat violations that these demands would ever be imposed. What I'll probably do is go back to community, go back to delegates and see if that satisfies their concerns. And if they're like, no, look at this language here. We are subject to this, even if we do nothing at all. Look at that language. If they have that concern still, I'll probably come back. But if delegates are like, oh, okay, we didn't get it, I'm fine now, I'll probably be fine as well. Thank you very much, staff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Councillor Kelly, your hand was up. Did it come down by accident?
No, I put it down because it was covered during my colleagues.
Okay, fair
questions.
enough. I just wanted to double check. Councillor Lulaf.
Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lulaf.
Thanks, Chair. Understanding that there are other types of small businesses that also require an amusement place license that don't primarily serve food but may serve food from time to time. I'm thinking of coffee shops and local breweries. Are you doing the same sort of consolidation with the amusement place license with those businesses at the same time? Or are they going to have to apply for 2 licenses and still go through the same rigmarole that you're trying to prevent for food premises?
Mr. Chair, this review is of food premises, which could potentially include cafes. It does not extend to breweries, which would more likely be an amusement place on their own. And so there are different licensing requirements that would provide, but certainly the goal of this review is to provide consistency among the 2 license categories.
I think it could be argued that like many of the smaller local breweries around the city aren't primarily amusement places, but are like tap rooms that happen to have some seating capacity. I think that it would make sense that if we're doing this sort of consolidation at a place that primarily serves food, that we would do the same for these sort of smaller tap rooms.
Mr. Chair, so if the brewery were to serve food, it's very possible that they fall under this food premise category. If there's questions about non-food premises that would fall under amusement places, or if there's a potential other licensing category, that's certainly something that we would be happy to look at in the context of our broader licensing bylaw review.
Okay, I would suggest that if we're doing this sort of consolidation with places that have amusement as sort of an ancillary activity, that we look at all places that have amusement as an ancillary activity and try to do that consolidation for each, rather than having this sort of standalone license that some are now going to have to apply for and some aren't. I think it should be about consistency and providing the same sort of opportunity for different businesses that have entertainment as an ancillary activity. And I think that that's something that we may have maybe inadvertently or maybe just by design overlooked through this review, because we're looking specifically at places that are serving food. But if we're going to be doing consolidations like this in one area, like all businesses, regardless of what they do, if they have entertainment as an ancillary activity, not their main activity, that we should have this sort of hybridization as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lulaf. Vice Chair Hill, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the responses so far, staff. So just piling on a few of the comments from my colleagues. Is there essentially like an easily definable line on the spectrum of entertainment that would be definable between like a massive Taylor Swift party at the CTC versus, the local grade 10 music student that comes in to play the guitar on a Friday night? Are there certain components of that we could simply like waive as part of being a restaurant or a food premise? So there's a couple gimmies in there, but then if you're going to go beyond that, you're going to have a rock concert and you're okay, that's not it. But like, is there a place where we could maybe define that just to make the permitting process a bit easier and frankly, a bit more cost effective, so that the honest restaurateur that's making this application doesn't get forced into this ethical dilemma of, okay, I know that I'm going to have a trivia night on Saturday, but really, do I want to pay an extra $200 for this when it's a minor thing and nobody's going to find out anyway?
Chair, I think staff could take that away and we could look at that as part of our business licensing bylaw review. So as Samantha mentioned earlier, we have another report coming before this committee. I'm just looking over here. I think it's May, so in the month of May. Food premise is one of our licensing schedules within the broader business licensing bylaw. I want to say we're at 36 or 37 schedules right now, somewhere in that ballpark. One of those schedules being the amusement license schedule. So we could look at that definition of amusement license as part of that broader review of our business license. Today's focus was really, before bringing that bylaw review before this committee, was just cleaning up our food premise license category, and then we'll bring the fulsome bylaw back to this committee in May.
Okay, thank you. We heard from the music industry four recommendations. A formal recognition as distinct, looking at some definitions, adopting an agent of change status, and alignment with modernizing the noise bylaws. I was wondering if staff could comment on the feasibility of incorporating some or all of those recommendations and what that work would constitute.
Maybe I'll start, Chair, and I'll hand it over to Jake. I think one of the items that we're looking at right now, and it's a very high priority item for the department, is implementing our new online business licensing solution. So I think we had a few speakers today speak to, having to go into industrial and fill out these forms. So we're looking to streamline that process and modernize it and have the technology available to make it easier for these licensees to be able to renew their licenses and get new licenses. But maybe I'll see if Jake has anything to add.
Thank you, Ryan. And through you, Mr. Chair, really just Bylaw Services is really looking forward to the online business licensing solution that we plan on implementing in November. And this will make the application process much easier for residents to be able to apply.
Thank you very much. And actually, that was going to be my next question. So I appreciate the comment about online registrations. I've spoken to a number of businesses about their concerns about the in-person process. I think that will be very well received. Did you have a timeline on that?
Currently, it is scheduled for November of this year.
And that's just following our May bylaw review update that we'll be doing. So we're doing all the paperwork in May and getting lined up to implement the technology later on in the fall.
Okay, thank you very much. And my last, probably more a comment. One of your slides, you spoke about liability coverage and an increase to the liability coverage. And I just wanted to put forth, and I don't think it's within our jurisdiction, but I put it out as a consideration when we're thinking about this issue of liability writ large, because it's often liability that kills these small businesses, right? Because as soon as you look at the insurance on this, whether it's community associations or small, art businesses, small restaurants, at-home businesses, the coverage costs as a result of current, liability insurance requirements is sometimes simply cost prohibitive, and it kills these opportunities, which I do think are aligned with some of the strategies we want to revitalize downtown, things like that. So my comment would be, I think we should look at this from the opposite side. We should be looking at this from the perspective of governance or advocacy to address the high end of liability so that can be brought down. And I think that's an advocacy issue that we need to look at from a city perspective across many domains, because I'll take slip and fall injuries, I'll take food injuries, name them. The upside liability risk to small businesses is massive. And as a result, those premiums that they're forced to pay are, again, they kill opportunity. So I really think that's something we should be taking away to look at how we can advocate. Maybe it's through FCM or AMO or something to address the issue of liability. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Johnson, I just saw your hand. You're back. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, it came down there. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank staff for updating the bylaw to reflect some of the challenges that businesses have seen in their shared commercial spaces. I think that's a great modernization of this policy, and knowing some businesses that actually take a lot of pride in sharing their facility with other smaller, upstart. It just generates that sort of first few years of financial success to be able to share the facility. But there has been times where it's been taken advantage of. And so I know the businesses that I've spoken to have been very pleased to see the city find a mechanism by which they can address some of those bad actors, and they have kept good records of those rentals and so on, and worked quite closely with inspections at that time. So I just wanted to put that forward to say this is a really great step. I know that bricks and mortar is very expensive to maintain, and we often encourage our nonprofit sectors to collaborate and work together in different facilities. And this is a way that we can support those small businesses, those small food producers, to save on cost and perhaps be able to invest more in the ingredients that they're providing, given how expensive groceries are. So I think this is great, and just to encourage, I know that you take an education first approach in everything that you do, and just to recognize that will be part of this, is will assist finding other things that you give for involvement in our. We're all. I keep hearing in different committees that or match people who are applying for grants or whatever. Like, have you ever been in situations where you've gone into shared spaces and been asked to match with other people looking for commercial kitchens, or has that not really come across your desk?
Did you catch all that? Councillor Johnson, you did freeze for a little bit there, but I'm just saying.
Oh, rats. I'm sorry. I do also talk.
She's now off. I mean, obviously, Councillor Johnson has the ability to reach out to staff between now and council to follow up with any questions. So I'm sure staff will be receptive to those. I don't want to take the vote without Councillor Johnson with us. I'm going to wait a second or two. Is staff able to give her a call by any chance? Okay. I'm just going to get an opinion from the clerk's office. If we have Councillor Johnson on speakerphone, will her vote be counted?
Chair, if I could have a moment to check with legal to just confirm that's in conformity with the clerk's procedures for virtual participation.
All right, thank you. In the meantime, I'll just read the motion before us to make sure it's clear for all committee members. So the motion that we're about to vote on is that the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee recommend that council approve the following amendments to the licensing bylaw number 2002-189 as amended. It's two parts. First, new and updated definitions and regulations in the bylaw and in Schedule 7 relating to food premises as described in this report, and the general form set out in Document 1. And Part 2, updated regulations in Schedule 5 relating to amusement places as described in this report and in the general form set out in document 2. So that's the recommendation. And Councillor Johnson can vote by speakerphone because it's live. Excellent. Okay, so is the motion before us carried? Okay, thank you. And as a reminder, this goes to council on April the 8th. We have 2 weeks and change. So if there are any potential amendments to this motion, again, colleagues, please give notice to staff, myself, so we can work on that sooner rather than later. Okay, item 6, I'm not aware of any in-camera items. Item 7 is notices of motion. I believe Councillor Devine, you have a notice on behalf of Councillor Menard, is that correct? We can get that on the screen for you. This is a notice of motion, so.
Whereas the City of Ottawa's bylaw review work plan identifies regulatory bylaws for review or development in each term of council, and whereas pursuant to Section 129 of the Municipal Act 2001, a municipality may prohibit and regulate with respect to noise, vibration, odor, and dust, and whereas the city's noise bylaw regulates noise in order to preserve, protect, and promote public health, safety, welfare, and the peace and quiet enjoyment of property by residents of the City of Ottawa. And whereas the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks has published provincial environmental noise guidance, including publication NPC 300, Environmental Noise Guidelines, Stationary and Transportation Sources, Approval and Planning, respecting the control of noise emissions from stationary sources and related land use planning considerations. And whereas one stated purpose of NPC 300 is to provide sound level limits that may be incorporated into municipal noise control bylaws developed under the Municipal Act. And whereas NPC 300 distinguishes between daytime and nighttime assessment periods and recognizes that nighttime conditions are particularly sensitive for residents due to lower background sound environments and sleep-related impacts. And whereas residents in neighborhoods adjacent to newly built apartment buildings, including but not limited to 275 Carling Avenue, the Clemo in Ward 17, and 1354 Carling Avenue, the Talisman in Ward 16, have reported recurring seasonal rooftop mechanical and air conditioning noise that may be inconsistent with the recommendations of NPC 300, but that has not resulted in an actionable enforcement outcome under the city's current noise bylaw. And whereas similar concerns have been raised in Ward 9, including situations where residents of 330 Titan Private and 120 Grant Carmen Drive report late night and overnight rooftop mechanical and refrigeration noise originating from a nearby commercial property that may also be inconsistent with the recommendations of NPC 300, but that have likewise not resulted in an actionable enforcement outcome under the city's current noise bylaw, bless you. And whereas municipal noise bylaws are primarily designed as complaint-driven enforcement instruments, and in practice, enforcement outcomes can depend on whether noise exceeds prescribed thresholds at the time and location of measurement, which may unintentionally create expectations among residents that bylaw enforcement alone can resolve technically stationary source noise conflicts. And whereas NPC 300 emphasizes a proactive approach to minimizing conflicts between noise-sensitive land uses and stationary noise sources at the earliest stages of land use planning and development approvals, suggesting that planning stage controls, such as equipment siting, noise studies, and mitigation measures secured through development approvals, may in some cases be more effective than after-the-fact enforcement alone. Therefore, be it resolved that staff include a review of the noise bylaw, including any disparities with the recommendations of the NPC 300 guideline, as an item for consideration is part of the development of the bylaw review plan to be approved by the next term of council.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. So that motion will be considered at our next meeting, which is April 16th. Are there any other notices of motion? Are there any inquiries? Go ahead, please, Councillor Devine, or sorry, Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an inquiry to Emergency Protective Services. A recent CTV News story found that roughly 55 fires were started by lithium batteries over the last 2 years. With lithium batteries being an active part of most Ottawa residents' day-to-day lives, it would be valuable for council to better understand the impact these devices have on the Ottawa Fire Services. With that in mind, please consider the following questions. Of the 55 fires identified by OFS to be started by lithium batteries, how many resulted in structural damage to a home or vehicle? To better understand historical trends, how many fires per year were generated by lithium batteries since 2023? What percentage of total fires responded to in each of those years were caused by lithium batteries? What factors make a home more vulnerable to a significant fire caused by lithium batteries? What devices are most frequently found to have issues with lithium battery fires in Ottawa? And how does OFS and the City of Ottawa currently communicate the dangers of lithium battery fires to the public? How does the service track the effectiveness of its outreach efforts? And does OFS require additional resources or support from council or other levels of government to respond to lithium battery fires or to reduce their frequencies? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Are there any other inquiries? I have one, which I've written out and I'll give to our committee coordinator in a second. HVAC noise emanating from the recently built and inhabited Talisman apartments at 1354 Carling Avenue have created chronic noise concerns in the warm months when the AC is running. The HVAC system is wrapped on the north, east, and west sides, but exposed or unwrapped on the south side, which faces the residential community. Ongoing decibel readings from Ottawa bylaw are at or very close to 50 decibels. Would staff in Ottawa bylaw and regulatory services please summarize work to date in monitoring and enforcing noise concerns at this location? What additional steps can Ottawa bylaw take with this property owner to mitigate noise from their HVAC system? Thank you. Okay, seeing no other inquiries, I'm not aware of any other business. Before we adjourn, just to let you know what's coming up next month. So our next scheduled meeting is Thursday, April 16th. At that meeting, the committee will receive the 2025 annual reports for both Public Safety Service and Bylaw and Regulatory Services. The very next day, there will be a joint meeting of our committee with PWIC, Public Works and Infrastructure, on April 17th to receive the Safe Access to Social Infrastructure Bylaw Review Report, also commonly known as the Bubble Bylaw Report. That committee meeting on the 17th, we're expecting to be a longer day, so we're going to start at 9 o'clock and we'll be in council chambers for that joint meeting. So given that the business of today's agenda is complete, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.